So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another large-scale siege battle. This time it's going to be on the Grey Havens. I thought, based on the description of the player who gave me the replay, that it was actually going to be on one of the new Linden-based maps that have been released as part of a sort of separate map pack that came out after released, and that's going to be sort of a regular thing where every sort of geographical location gets a little map pack all of their own, which can be added on via the ModDB. But no, this is just the Grey Havens. Not that that's a bad thing, of course, because this is one of WK's finest pieces of work. But much like the Helm's Deep map that came before it, where it sort of reverted to an older version, this one also has something wrong with it, sort of, again, in line with a lot of the other siege maps, which seem to have undergone something quite weird in the transition to 0.97, and that is this, which this is supposed to be the ocean, but instead it's this rather horrifying sort of cliff that leads into another set of land. But it doesn't matter anyway, because obviously the main map itself is going to be the same, and the scene for this particular battle is going to be that the forces of evil, in particular the evil men, have found a way to circumvent a lot of the defences of the west and occupy the Grey Havens. And now the Free Peoples of Middle-earth are going to make a response to this. Of course, they can't afford to lose the most westerly point of their forces. That would be considerably bad, considering the pressure that the east would be under. So we'll go through the attackers first of all, of course. It is going to be the forces of good that are attacking this time, so of course that does sort of bring about a different dynamic. Usually the forces of evil will simply crash against the defences and try and overwhelm them. When the forces of good are on the attack, particularly when there's elves like in Ladris over here, played by the Steward of Dale, they often need to be a little bit more careful because they don't have the disposable manpower that the evil factions have, but if they can make it all about quality and melee, the evil factions will certainly struggle to hold the defensive points that they choose, certainly more so than the forces of good. But we see here some Swords of Rivendell with the armour upgrade. This, of course, the Imladris lower end units, of course, they aren't low tier in terms of what they are compared to other factions, but their armour, even when you upgrade it, is somewhat less than the rest of the Imladris roster, but still, as with most basic Elven line infantry, they more than make up for that with some very nice melee defense. And of course, as far as elves go, they are cheaper than the rest of the Imladris roster, so unsurprisingly, they're going to be pushing up the RAM. Pushing up both of the siege towers, flanking that, we have two units of the Bruinen River Wards, some heavy elven swordsmen, which of course have been given sort of the standard elven curved blade now, rather than the really overly long, almost anime swords that they had before. So of course, sort of standard heavy elven swordsmen along the same sorts of lines as the Hiri Lung from Mirkwood or the Mithlon Swordmasters from Linden, but of course in true Imladris fashion they have very high defense values just because they combine their elven melee skill with that armour that Imladris are very well known for. Got some Eldarenway spearmen here, very expensive heavy elven spears, but of course, as with most other Imladris infantry, the price you pay is more than worth it for the quality that they deliver in melee. Very nice stats. Of course, they do have that spear malice against other infantry in melee, but their stats are high enough to the point where the spear malice is not as big of an issue as it can be for more basic units of spears. Got a few units here, I think 3 units in total of upgraded Imladris Guardians, so the additional armour, of course, making them just a little bit tougher. And as far as line infantry goes, of course, they are one of, if not the strongest unit of line infantry that you can mass up in the game. There are a few other units that can contest that, including something like the Noldorin Guard from Linden, but the Imladris Guardians are certainly in pole position to take that title home with them. We also have a couple of units from Imladris Sentries. Not too surprised to see them, because of course Elven Pikemen, they offer all the benefits that pikes usually do with that phalanx, keeping men at arm's length, sort of making sure they can't get into melee easily. But also most pikes tend to do their killing quite slowly with low stats, but that is not going to be the case for Elven pikemen. They can often leave a carpet of bodies behind them as they continue to advance forward in that phalanx formation. Eldarenway Swordmasters, of course, the even higher tier variant of the Bruinen River Wards that we saw in front of them. Obviously ridiculous stats on these guys really, but they aren't multiple HP, so they are still vulnerable to some things like missile attacks and cavalry charges. In spite of their good defense, they can somewhat dodge a charge in the way that elves can, but also missile attacks. Their armour is good, but even so they are still unshielded, so that is one way in which you can deal with them. They're also very expensive, of course, as elven units like this are. And then finally, the pride and joy, or at least one of them, of the Imladris infantry force, we have the Gwaithie Myrdain. They of course have now got their big two-handed warhammers, which means that they have that nice AP damage, a little bit more offensively focused than they were in the previous patch. They've got their darker armour now as well. Very, very deadly. And as Imladris often do with a lot of their units, this is definitely going to be a contender for the best bodyguard unit that is also a piece of AP shock infantry as well. And then we also have some Eldraine archers over here, just putting their stakes on the side, presumably to stop any cavalry from coming out and engaging them. But only the one unit of archers by the looks of things, because Imladris don't really have a lot of units that can hide. I don't think they have any, in fact. So just the one unit of archers, but not terribly surprising considering it is Imladris and their strengths very much lie in melee. Then we have Lord Kith playing as Numenor. Numenor, similar to Imladris in some ways in the way that they often approach things, albeit with a few different units and how they sort of affect the roster. The Remena about him, very much the equivalent of the Imladris Guardians for Imladris. They have very, very nice attack values for a line infantry unit. Not necessarily as high a defensive skill as someone like Imladris, or even something like the Alcarondas Legion from Umbar has, but the attack is meant to more than make up for that, and of course they have very nice armour as well. Very, very strong unit of line infantry, going to be difficult for the defenders to really win a quality fight on this side of things, at least in the north, with Imladris and Numenor bearing down on them. The Remena and Nar-Dukadar also offer AP as spearmen, which is also very nice for them. In here we have more Remena about him. There's some Seafarers of Nindamos, which is unsurprising considering the they are the primary source of AP in the Numenor line, in spite of the Nar-Dukadar also having it. Pharazim Swordmasters are in here, obviously a very, very strong unit of heavy swordsman bodyguard tier, of course. And then the Royal Legion of Armenelos, that's going to be the General's bodyguard, just, shields, making him a little bit safer perhaps. Also, the Royal Legion of Armenelos have a few more men in the unit in comparison to a lot of other General's bodyguard units, so perhaps more worthwhile to take them than more often than not anyway. Seafarers of Nindamos, and then back here, some Naruna Aru units, the Sentinels and the Royal Guard. So the Royal Guard, of course, both of them can inspire nearby units. The Royal Guard with their missiles, decent missiles, very difficult to wear down from afar as well, and of course spears and melee. And then the Naruna Aru Sentinels, very strong pikes, very similar to the Imladris sentries in the amount of power that they have. Then over here in the middle we have Dorwinion, played by Agalar Galudithon. Dorwinion, of course, elven human hybrids. Again, a lot of quality that Dorwinion can field. Elvelyn marksmen here on the front, a very solid unit of line archers with their heavy armour. Means that they can certainly wear down enemy skirmish positions from afar. Definitely something Dorwinion can engage in quite frequently. Just in behind them we have the Nandor Glade Riders, of course. We've seen how deadly they can be in the right hands. Huge charge bonus, the full charge bonus of 20, so they have a similar charge that Knights have. But of course the downside to them is that they are very fragile, especially to archers. They can be very easy to kill off, so you do need to be careful with them. Over here, the main body of the Dorwinion army, we have some Elvelyn Vineguard, so some basic spears, not a lot of attack on them, but very resilient with their armour, shields and defensive values. Elvelyn infantry, kind of similar, in the sense that the human units for Dorwinion are very much focused around their defence and outlasting their opponent. So again, not necessarily the highest attack values, but very, very nice defensive values. Here in the middle we've got some more Vineguard. We have a combination of Morroquendi pikes. The Elvelyn Hammerguard are in here as well, which, as far as the Elvelyn units go, they are the exception to the rule, as there often is. All the other Elvelyn units are defensively minded. The Hammerguard are most certainly not, with their very high AP damage. They are a very aggressive unit of infantry, very useful in this situation as well with their heavy AP. Morroquendi pikes, more Elvelyn Vineguard, and then just to his left we have Tommy Wiseau, who's going to be playing as Gondor. So Gondor, of course, a lot of armoured and shielded infantry. You could say that AP is a bit of an Achilles heel of Gondor, because it will never go to waste against them, but their infantry overall is still very, very strong. We have some Gondor spearmen fully upgraded, so that will of course make them just that little bit more tanky in melee, alongside Dorwinion as well. There's a lot of staying power here in both of these armies, but not necessarily a lot of base damage. And of course we also have some fully upgraded Gondor infantry as well, which will offer very much the same kind of strengths as the Elvelyn infantry they will be fighting alongside today. More Gondor spearmen, some fully upgraded Gondor archers, also good in a skirmish fight, slightly cheaper than the Elvelyn marksmen, but of course slightly less damage, but fully upgraded with their armour. They will offer you about the same level of expertise in fighting other archers. Just in behind them, we have a unit of fully upgraded veterans of Osgiliath as well, which double as very nice line infantry in melee. They are the superior, the Elvelyn marksmen that they are fighting alongside, so Gondor very much going for the heavily armoured archers that they are known for. More fully upgraded Gondorian infantry, some fully upgraded Axemen of Lasarnak as well, giving the Gondorian infantry that aggressive edge as well with a bit of AP. Some Pelagia Marines, unsurprising to see javelins. Javelins are a very useful tool for any faction to bring. Dorwinion may have some hidden javelins as well of the Selduin River Patrol. Just in behind them, some Fountain Guard, very nice AP phalanx unit as well. a very useful unit for Gondor to bring, and then very much a similar kind of unit to the Royal Legion of Armenelos, only with a few less men in the unit, the Wardens of the White Tower, which is where the Gondorian general is going to be. And then finally, the army attacking from the south, we have Stewed Balrog, who is going to be playing as Cardland. Cardland seem to be quite a popular faction in this patch. People like to harp on their morale, but the fact that people keep playing them suggests that they are quite strong, and I would agree. And I think a lot of that is bound up in their crossbows, but that's a discussion for another time, I think. Some civilians pushing up the ram, being used as the sacrificial lambs there. Erinvorn Axemen, just a unit of very cheap axe units, which can use a bit of AP, but of course they have very little staying power in melee. Some Minhiriath men-at-arms, as well as some Greenway Garrison archers. We have the Tharbad Warhammers, a very similar unit to the Alvelin Hammer Guard that they are on the same side as today. Some Tharbad Riders, good to see a little bit of cavalry at the very least, because I can be sure that there's going to be some form of sally out from the defenders. The Minhiriath Spearmen, who do have a little bit of AP actually, which I'm a bit confused as to why, to be honest. Why this very basic unit of heavily armoured sort of western spears have AP. I'm not really sure what the thinking was behind that, because it doesn't really seem to assist them all that much. And it's not as if Cardland are hurting for AP in other areas anyway, so I don't really know what the reasoning is behind that, but it's a small enough value to the point where it's not overly a problem, I think. We have, at least not from what I've seen, you know, the Minhiriath spears have certainly not punched above their weight. You know, Alcarondas Legion and the like, we've seen them absolutely roll over Minhiriath spearmen before. Minhiriath sharpshooters, obviously again this is where Cardland's true strength lies to my mind, their crossbows. Crossbows with the archers being maybe a little bit underwhelming to my eye in this patch. A unit of crossbows offer the stopping power that they simply do not have. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul, primarily their function will be as a morale battery. They have a very wide area of effect, and it will keep the Cardland army fighting for much longer. Some Minhiriath archers just to scavenge with the enemy. Unsurprising to see the full complement of crossbows here today. More Minhiriath men-at-arms, some more Greenway Garrison footmen, and some more civilians. Unsurprising as well to see Cardland go more numbers heavy, because a lot of the other factions today have gone more quality heavy, with the possible exception of Gondor. Now moving on to the defenders, we have a combination of Rudour, Rune and Karnd on the defence today. Starting off with Secretariat, who's going to be playing as Rudour. Rudour, probably my personal favourite faction to play, honestly, in 0.97. Again, that boils down mostly to their javelins and axe throwers. But once again, I feel as though that's a discussion for another time. Maybe on Scouts of Entertainment's podcast, we can have a little discussion about that at some point soon. Dunman Spearmen, though. Cheap militia spears for the evil men. Obviously, they're just here to hold the line. Something a little bit more potent in the attacking department. We have the Rudour Axemen, of course, very, very vulnerable to missiles still. But a good amount of AP nonetheless, which is going to be very useful against pretty much all the factions on display here today, to be honest with you. You know, only really Dorwinion with their Morroquendi are not overtly reliant on their armour. Even Imladris pack on the armour a bit. Dunman Hunters, so some cheap archers just to try and spray down Cardland on the approach. But this again is going to be where the true damage at range is going to be done. The Ettenmore's Troll Hunters, they're heavily armoured javelin men which double as spears. Cranodyne Berserkers, they do throw a single volley of axes before charging into melee, and they're very accomplished in melee as well. Very, very nice makeshift shock troops there. Some upgraded Rudour clansmen on the front line with their armour, so they're going to be trying to hold the line as the Gondorians start pushing in alongside Dorwinion. More Rudour clansmen, and up on the hill some Runic and Karndish support from some Eastron crossbows, played by my doppelganger. He played well in the last battle we saw him when he was playing as Harad. We'll see how well he can do as Rune. Once again, the crossbows, they offer so much more stopping power than archers, particularly in this patch it seems, that I've noticed so far. It might just be my poor luck being on the end of crossbows quite a lot, but I certainly feel as though if you can bring crossbows, whether you're in a siege or on a field, it's worth bringing them over archers, definitely. With very few exceptions, you know, stuff like the special projectiles from the elves, like particularly Lothlorien, certainly is worthwhile, but for the most part I just feel as though the damage crossbows can do far outweighs the value that archers can bring in this patch. Nomadic Raiders, cheap archers in particular have obviously been made less useful, which is definitely the right way to go, but I feel as though, again, I will dip into this a little bit now because it has come up. I do feel as though rather than making the more expensive archers along the lines of the the veterans of Osgiliath, Kerandros marksmen and, you know, that sort of thing, the sort of more expensive upper end, you know, heavily armoured perhaps, I feel as though rather than making them better, they've just brought the lower tier archers down to the level they down to their level essentially. So rather than getting any buffs really, they've just sort of been made more attractive in comparison to lower tier archers like this. But I'm sure in this battle the archers will completely prove me wrong and get tons and tons of kills, but we shall see. Granadine Rangers. Rangers of course are still very much the same thing they always were. The body piercing is very cut and dry. It makes them very powerful in a siege like this. Rudauer with a catapult, some Black Waltz back here offering a bit of AP with their multiple HP nature as well, with very low defense. Lucky Hussar playing as Khan is the one who sent me the replay, so big thank you to him. He's got some Brotherhood of the Shadows over here. They're assassin units which throw their throwing daggers and then get into melee with their curved blades as well. More footmen, some Variag bowmen, heavily armoured archers there. On the front line we have some Nurad halberds, although they're going to need far more than this if they're going to put up any sort of defence against Numenor. If they're just going to put that unit of Nurad halberds there, they may as well pull it back, because it won't achieve much of anything. Some Eastron clansmen fully upgraded, some Camel's Shadow Guard, some Balchoth tribesmen who actually have a bit of an armour upgrade going on here now, which is cool to see. Nice to see these little details shining through, but of course they still will be somewhat vulnerable to archers in spite of their shields and newfound armour upgrade. They're still very much lighter units. Some Gamprim here fighting alongside the Nurad halberds, and then also some Flagrim to add a bit of AP, but again they're up against the elves, so the Flagrim will find themselves outmatched even with the AP. Nomadic Raiders, Eastron crossbowmen, more Nurad footmen. We have some more Variag bowmen as well, heading back towards the back end of the settlement. We have some Brotherhood of the Wain. Now this is a very interesting unit because Khand now have a unit of chariots, and they wield crossbows as well, so much like the other unit of chariots that was added in this patch, the Ironfoot chariots. They are crossbow wielders, so this means that Runic chariots have got the archers, Linden chariots have got the javelins, and then the Dwarven and Khandish chariots have got the crossbows. And to be honest with you, Khand can justify bringing these chariots more so than perhaps the other factions can, because it's easier to afford them with Khand. You know, Linden in particular, the rest of their army is also very expensive, in addition to the chariots being extremely expensive as well, in spite of javelins probably being preferable on the chariots, to be honest with you, with their close range nature. Some Black Wolds back here, some Ferodrum javelins. We have some Brotherhood of the Spear, which are a very good spear unit, to be fair. I'm not really sure about the spear itself. It almost looks like a foam spear with the dimensions of it, but there's no doubting the effectiveness of this unit on the field. The Brotherhood of the Axe as well, nice little inspiration bonus on them, as well as a lot of good AP. Nurad Stormguard, Carmel's Chosen, Loke Scion Rim, some Balchor Sapphire Blazemen, a lot of the elite units back here. We have the Dragon's Breath, which is a sort of fire launcher. It don't pay attention to the cannonballs, it's not really a cannon. It's it will fire a projectile of pure flame at the enemy and do a lot of damage. We'll see how useful it's going to be in this situation, whether it can get good shots with the narrow angles that it has. Some Shadow Bow, so some more mercenaries. We have the Variag mercenaries as well with their armour upgrade to make them a little bit more tough. And then some Flagrim and Gamprim, and that's pretty much it, with some more nomadic infantry over here, and some Brotherhood of the Sword, so a nice unit of dual-wielding infantry as well with a lot of melee defense. But without further ado, let's begin. It'll be interesting to see how aggressive the attacks are here. I assume they're going to be very aggressive, actually, purely because the Grey Havens, when you're talking about an 8-player battle, can often last over 50,000 frames, but that isn't the case here. So I believe the attackers will be more aggressive, and they won't play that ridiculous game of cat and mouse that some attackers try to do, where they poke their javelins inside the gate and then just try and run backwards and forwards until they get a few volleys off, until everyone gets hideously bored, and then they finally start the battle in earnest. Let's go and see what's happening over here. So Imladris is definitely pushing forward quickly, which is good to see from the Steward of Dale. They will need to be careful though, because they do have to worry about the Brotherhood of the Wain coming forward, but perhaps not as much cavalry sallying out from the Grey Havens as they would have feared, especially considering that Khand are on the defence. But still, nonetheless, Imladris will need to be careful, and if I were Khand, Imladris would definitely be the faction I would want to go after, because they have a relatively small army and chariots capable of doing a lot of damage very quickly, killing off a lot of unit models, and that is going to be most detrimental to the continued health of the Imladris army in this fight. Eldarenway archers also moving forward. You can see that already Numenor are heading forward. Like I said, they're going to need to reinforce this single unit of Nurad halberds, otherwise Numenor is going to blow them to pieces. Yes, indeed, the Gondor Spearmen now going to batter down one of the gates on the front of the settlement here, Over here, though, there's a lot more in terms of infantry to hold the enemy back. Like 3 units of clansmen still not going to be enough in the long run, but it won't be pushed through quite so quickly as a single unit of Nurad halberds. And then Cardland having to deal with 2 gates. They do have the numbers, but I don't think they have the quality to engage in that, especially not with the Dragon's Breath cannon pointing directly at one of them. Brotherhood of the Wain are coming forward, so a good sally out here. We'll see how deadly the Candish chariots can be. Looks like they already have been shooting their crossbows at the Eldarenway spearmen. This is a bit of a bold move, because if they do get bogged down on the Eldarenway spearmen for too long, they will start to take losses, but nice to see the lucky Hussar at this point does have the ability to focus fully on this micro. So he gets a few more kills on the Eldarenway spearmen, and as long as you keep chariots moving, they can be very difficult to deal with. And if you chase after the Brotherhood of the Wain, they're going to respond in kind with some very nasty crossbow bolts. So a nice bit of ranged AP that Khan have there, because other than that, the only ranged AP they really have is on some very low tier javelins and low tier javelin cavalry, which is easy to kill off. Yeah, but the Brotherhood of the Wain managing to escape yet again. So this unit of Eldarenway spearmen being bullied so far. And this is the unit they're having to sort of throw under the bus, but this will incentivize Imladris to get into the settlement as quickly as they possibly can, because as soon as they make the engagement narrow, that's when chariots are much less useful. But this of course means that the Nurad halberds and the runic units over here should have all the incentive they need to try and hold Imladris outside the walls. This is absolutely a part of the battlefield they shouldn't give up without a fight. Meanwhile, civilians battering down another one of the Grey Havens gates. You can see the full Numenor army is moving forward, and it's good to see that Lucky Hussar has pulled back a little bit, and they have managed to sort of reinforce this area, because I was worried that unit of halberds would just be overrun by the Numenorian infantry, because you can't afford to just send a single unit of halberds against this Numenor army. They'll be destroyed very, very quickly indeed. Gondor and Dorwinion working in tandem, the Elvelyn marksmen trying to shoot over the walls. They do actually have a decent shot here into the back of this Rudau position, and they're going after the Franadine Berserkers, which is good. Very worthwhile target indeed to go after. Meanwhile, Cardland facing down a unit of Dunman Spearmen that have put themselves into shield wall. The civilians have actually got better attack than a unit of Militia Spears like this, but I would still back the Dunman Spearmen to win this fight, to be honest with you, because the civilians are not going to have a particularly well-ordered engagement there. Meanwhile, the Brotherhood of the Wain continuing to make a nuisance of themselves. And they've done very well so far, the Brotherhood of the Wain, because even if they just kill off these Eldarenway killing off these Eldarenway spearmen will go most of the way toward paying for their inclusion. The Brotherhood of the Wain are more expensive than a single unit of Eldarenway spears, but having said that, like Imladris, without any cavalry of their own, Imladris have to resort to this. Which is definitely not preferable, and you can see here that with these crossbows they're doing very, very nicely. As soon as they're out of ammo, of course, they'll then just have to resort to running through the lines, but then they should be able to get some pretty decent kills as well. But Imladris do have their pikes set up, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult for the Brotherhood of the Wain to sort of worm their way into those positions. Some clansmen blocking the halberds there, so again, things have settled down on this front, I think because Imladris are trying to chase off the chariots with their spears, but very much that fight is only going to be heading in one direction. Meanwhile, Numenor are now heading in to engage the Nurad halberds, and you can see that the Remena Nardukadar are attacking them from the front. And honestly, if it's just a single unit facing off against the halberds will be able to hold their phalanx, and the AP will help them greatly against the heavily armoured Numenorian infantry. And also the range support they're also getting from the hill. It may only be Variag Bowman, but certainly the range support will be very welcome. However, this is going to be a worrying sight for Khan. The Seafarers of Nindamos have got absolutely brutal missile damage. They don't have many volleys in them, but what volleys they do have will be able to do tons of damage, and they're going after the Nurad footmen. You can see just in one volley, they cut that unit's manpower down to size quite a lot. The big shields on the Nurad footmen not saving them from their wrath, and you can see that Numenor are coming in force, which is good to see, because I haven't actually seen Lord Kith in a battle up to this point, and one thing that newer players tend to do is not be aggressive enough, and Khan are pretty undermanned over here, and if he pushes forward with this much aggression, he'll be in for a good time, and then he can also relieve a beleaguered Imladris force from the pressure of those Brotherhood of the Wain. And I can't really see Khan holding this force back all on their lonesome here. They're going to need more support, a lot more support. And it's a shame they don't have their rangers over here, because this would be an absolutely perfect target. The Variag Bowman will do some damage, but not enough to really halt the tide of Numenor. Numenor will take losses themselves doing this, of course, but the chaos it will engender in the defence will be more than worth it. Meanwhile, you can see over here that Dorwinion and Gondor also engaging in a very aggressive push, which is good to see. You know, the attackers often make the mistake of just trickling in, but they're being aggressive on all fronts, which puts tremendous pressure on the defenders. This, of course, that was... I mean, honestly, that was a very good hit, but it could have been worse. It got right into the middle here. All these Elvalin, Vinegard and Gondor Spearmen would have been in dreadful trouble. They're trying to push their way through, and they're succeeding at it. Question is, can another volley from that catapult come in and get direct hits? No, they're very fortunate here, Dorwinion and Gondor. They are taking losses from this, but again, it's nowhere near as critical as it could be. And now the Elvalin Vinegard are pushing their way through Agalar Galudithon. The Franadine Berserkers are trying to get in here, and again, I feel as though the defenders, they weren't as prepared for this as they could have been. They didn't have enough of their troops on the front. And now with the Elvalin Vinegard spread out, the catapult is not really hitting into the centre of this mass over here. And a lot of the Dorwinian spears are now rushing forwards, and a unit of basic archers is not going to be enough. The heavily armoured and shielded Dorwinian infantry units are going to push forward. The Ettenmore Troll Hunters getting some javelins into the side here, but I'm sure they were hoping to save their javies for a unit more dangerous than the Elvalin Vinegard. But needs must, they need to contain this situation, because I thought things were going badly for them over on the other side against Numenor, but this could be a disaster in the making. Based on the frame rate, juddering a little bit there, a bit of friendly fire from the catapult, unfortunate. Based on the frame rate struggling a little bit, I think actually it's about time we went down to half speed, because there's a lot happening all at once. The Rangers are probably firing in there, which is good. Dunman Spearmen easily going to be able to kill off the civilians there, but it looks as though Cardland are more intent on coming through here, and indeed they are. Stu Balrog pushing very aggressively in, so good to see that the attackers are being aggressive on all fronts here. They're really combining their efforts to try and put real pressure on the defenders. Of course, this could backfire, but I feel as though this is, when you have a big numbers advantage, particularly when it's a 5v3 like this, if you play in this manner, you make it very difficult for the defenders. Because chances are you're going to break through somewhere, and as soon as you break through in one area, the dominoes start to fall. But Cardland here with their Minhiriath units, they don't have any units nearby which are inspiring them, I don't think. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul could be just stationed on the other side of this gate, and that would make it much less likely that these Minhiriath units would break, but as it is, I'm not sure. It's not looking like they're feeling too confident about their chances, especially not when they're taking a lot of missile damage. There's also the Shadow Bows over there. The Dragon's Breath cannon is wheeling its way forward rather menacingly. Imladris have come forward in force now as well, which they're obviously eager to get inside the settlement before the Brotherhood of the Wain come back, I would assume. But the Balchoth Tribesmen trying to support the front line of Clansmen and Nurad Halberns, but again, the attackers here have got a bit of a quality advantage, but it's a lot of men they have to cut through defending this fortress now. We shall see if Imladris have the manpower to keep up this assault for an extended period of time, because the defenders certainly have reinforcements they can send in. Nurad footmen coming in over here. The Bruinen River Wards are losing this fight against the Flagrim, but that's more down to the fact that the crossbows are in a perfect position to help slaughter them. So the Flagrim just holding them in place essentially for the crossbows to do their thing. Balchoth Tribesmen are going to be engaged in melee by the Imladris Guardians pushing through. You can see actually over here, the Javelins must have also had a bit of an effect on this side as well. The Gamprim now going to be able to finish off a very depleted unit of Bruinen River Wards as the Imladris Guardians get into melee. They might be on stand and shoot here, the Balchoth Tribesmen. And the door has been closed. A few of the Imladris Guardians have trickled through, but at this point there's enough men on this front line, I think, to hold them back. How are Numenor getting along? Very nicely. They've managed to blow through that defence, as was sort of expected. But interestingly enough, a portion of their army has been essentially marooned in the settlement, as Khand have actually sort of cut the Numenorian reinforcements off, but I feel as though Numenor will be able to fight their way out of this. A combination of Ramena Abarim and Seafarers of Nindamos are already going to work on a unit of Nurad footmen. And these Variag bowmen who are out of ammunition now at this point are also going to get into melee. But this is the issue that Khand are going to have here against Numenor. Numenor's infantry is just far in excess of Khan's here in terms of quality. Khand have got a lot of AP, which will have an effect on Numenor. But you'd have to say that if they're going to slow this advance down, they're going to need to use their ranged units. Especially with the Farazim Swordmasters at the heart of all of these Romena units. You know, they're going to need more than this to hold them back. And credit to the Numenor player, because I feel as though, you know, the defenders were not expecting a push as aggressive as this. And they've been made to pay for it so far, certainly. But time will tell whether the attackers have the manpower to continue this momentum. Of course, they will have less at their disposal than the evil men. Nomadic raiders shooting away. Things have certainly developed over here. There's a large portion of Gondor infantry that's routing. That's a huge amount of Gondorians that's routing. So that must be the catapult and a combination of all of the ranged units firing into them as well. And again, they had the opportunity, I think, to pour in and then spread out. I feel as though what may have happened here, though, is that they didn't spread out quickly enough, and the catapult and all of the Rudauer javelins have just gone to town on them. A lot of those units probably will come back, but that's a devastating blow for the attackers here, because things were going so well for them here on the Numenorian front and on this gate over here. But as things have developed now, the defenders have managed to force them back, significantly so. There are still a few Elvalin units in here, but they're being set upon now by Witch Realm enslavers. Elvalin marksmen will stand no chance against them in close quarters. There are some javelins here trying to do some damage, and they will. But their time is short. They're already shaken. They're taking direct missile fire from the nomadic raiders in behind. Very nice indeed. It's definitely a very chaotic assault so far. The Dunman Hunters are here. It looks as though, yeah, those civilians were killed off, and Cardland do have a force over here, but they're just biding their time. They're definitely focusing on this gate down here. They're still coming in, but it's been down here it's been very costly for Cardland. Rune have managed to hold them at bay, and also, particularly on this gate, there is a very nice hill that can be used by the defenders. The Dragon's Breath cannon is here, but I don't think that it's made any shots, because obviously its own men are in the way. And Medieval 2 is quite anal about not allowing you to fire through your own men. I do think there should be a damn the casualties fire anyway option, especially for the orcs, but I'm not sure if that's possible in Medieval 2, to be honest with you. Tharbad Warhammer cycling back out. I think Stu Balrog realises the level of losses that he's taking here. He does need to keep up the assault, but I feel as though all he needs to do is engage at this point. Because Numenor is having success, at least for the time being. At this point, Khand are starting to get things a little bit more under control. The Nurad Windblades are charging downhill. The Nomadic Raiders are surrounded, but with the Romena Nardukadar pointing the wrong way, the Khandish fast-moving melee cavalry is going to be able to recharge into the Nardukadar and do a lot of damage as well. Now that they're going to turn around, however, the Windblades do need to get out of there, because the Nardukadar are a very devastating unit of spears. But the Windblades are a very quick unit of cavalry, and that is an element of inexperience, because anyone who's in the know does know that if you turn units around to meet a cav charge and counter charge them, you will sort of fare a lot better rather than just allowing the rear charge to happen. Of course, it feels a little bit weird to turn around and give your back to the enemy infantry you're engaged with, but it's far better to let the infantry get a few more kills than the cavalry to get a few dozen more kills. I suppose that's the thinking there. Nurad footmen still engaged with the Romena Abarim, but the balance of forces is now evenly matched, and are Numenor at this point running out of steam. Things were going well, but Khand blocking off the reinforcements has proved to be a bit of a problem here. You can see the Nurad halberds are taking dreadful losses to the seafarers of Nindamos, so I think Numenor will see the trouble they're in, and they need to get the rest of their troops inside the settlement to start doing the same damage that they were doing earlier in the fight. These Romena Abarim and seafarers still trying to fight their way back towards the gate, but the addition of those Variag bowmen has made things a little bit more difficult. I'm sure they will eventually. The Numenorian infantry is superior, but Khand definitely being a real annoyance for Numenor here. They need to get the Royal Legion, the rest of their seafarers, and their Naru Naaru units in to support their line infantry. The Nardukadar is shaken. The Farazim Swordmasters still in here. They're taking missile fire from the nomadic infantry in behind, but with how heavily armoured they are, they should be able to survive that. Some Eastron crossbows would be a different matter. There's still these Imladris Guardians in behind who have managed to polish off these Balchoth Tribesmen, but now they need to get in here to support the infantry, because they're having real trouble at the gatehouse. There's just so much Nurad and Eastron units that have been committed forward to stop the advance from Imladris that they haven't really been able to make any sort of concrete progress. Let's go back up to 1 speed, I think. The Gamprim is still fighting, and to be fair, the Brunnen River Wards will probably win this fight now, actually. So in spite of the huge losses they took from the Javelins, their elven quality is still shining through. Here comes some Shadow Guard to lend some much-needed aid to keep this section of the battle under control. Remena Abarim being shot in the flank by Veriag Bowman. And there's still the Nurad Windblades heading around here as well. Let's see what's going on over here. Dorwinion and Gondor still pushing forward very aggressively, but still they're not able to get into the settlement and spread out quickly enough. And that catapult must have a lot of kills so far, but Gondor and Dorwinion between them do have a fairly large army. Gondor have brought a lot of their more standard units rather than their elites, which I do feel as though is the right move, especially moving alongside the Dorwinion elves as they are. But they need to get out of here. They're at the mercy of that catapult. They need to start moving up the hill. They're using their javelins here to burn down the Hradodine Berserkers. The Ettenmall's Troll Hunters are sort of caught behind the enemy advance at this point. There are the Nandor Glade Riders, but with how fragile they are in this sort of engagement, it's not ideal for them. They're going to try and get a charge into the Dunman Hunters, and they will succeed. And even with only 13 of them, with a charge bonus of 20, that should be... Yeah, you can see how quickly they kill things off the charge. And again, they are very light archers they're charging into, but that's a depleted unit of Nandor Glade Riders, and they killed like 50 men there. Admittedly, again, against a pretty much ideal target for their charge. Helveling Vinegard finishing off some defenders up on the walls. Axeman of Lasarnak getting in here against the Ettenmall's Troll Hunters. A bit of panic is starting to set in the Rudauer lines. Ooh, and another really nice catapult hit there into the Morroquendi Pikes, a very important unit to go after. But chaos has well and truly erupted down here. Again, Rudauer usually have pretty good morale, actually, especially for the evil men. But in this sort of situation, they are, you know, being overrun by the infantry. But as long as they can force the attrition to favour them, they should be pretty good. I mean, there's still a fair amount of Dorwinion reinforcements in particular waiting to come in. Morroquendi Pikes pushing their way up the hill with the Selduin River Patrol, or Kelduin River Patrol, I'm not really sure which it is. Kelduin sounds more correct. Witch-Omen Slavers coming back down the hill, perhaps right into the teeth of the Morroquendi Pikes, we shall see. Have Cardlan made any made any progress? The Hearthguard of Amon Sul are here. No is the answer. Cardlan's still very much held in place. The Gamprim and the Scion Rim and the Brotherhood of the Sword are a very nice combination of skill, AP, and resilience. And Cardlan don't look like they've had much of an answer to that, especially with the support of the archers up on the hill. I think that's the Brotherhood of the Wain, indeed it is. So the crossbows are firing into Cardlan as well. Cardlan being given a taste of their own medicine at the end of a crossbow bolt. But yeah, Rune have very much held the line here with a bit of support from Khand. And I'm surprised Cardlan haven't tried to claim the walls, because claiming the walls would give them a nice springboard to use their crossbows. But as it is, I mean, it was always going to be fairly difficult, I think, for Cardlan in particular, because they had to take 2 gates rather than just the 1. But even still, very good news for the defenders, this. Of course, with 5 armies, all of the attacking armies don't necessarily need to be outright victorious. Gondor moving up the hill here, the Gondorian infantry engaging the Witch-Omen Enslavers, and through sheer force of numbers, it looks like they're going to win this fight. The Blackwolds and the Enslavers extremely powerful against armoured units like the Gondor infantry are, and now the fight has turned around, but again, through sheer weight of numbers, you would imagine they're going to force their way through here, but they're taking grievous losses in doing it, Dorwinion and Gondor, to actually make this progress. Veterans of Osgiliath, Helvellyn infantry moving forward, the Gondorians now trying to come around from the rear of this Rudauer position, and Cardlan have managed to make it into the settlement over here, because obviously Rudauer had their attention focused elsewhere, and basic units were not going to be enough to stop the Erinthorn Axemen and Minhiriath units from entering into the settlement. The crossbows would probably be best served coming around here now, just getting into the settlement itself. Gondor infantry flooding over. I can appreciate how aggressive the attackers have been here, and it does look as though, yeah, Imladris have now managed to force their way through. Have Numenor managed to do the same? Yes, they have. Numenor managed to get their units in through the door. Obviously, Khan were only going to be able to hold them at bay for so long. And this, of course, means that Numenor and Imladris have been victorious. And at less of a cost, you would have to say, than Gondor and Dorwinion are making of things so far. Eldarenway archers getting up onto the hill. What are they shooting at? Fleeing units of crossbowmen. So yeah, at this point you would have to say it's probably going to be a case of trying to retreat as much of their units as they can for the defenders. They still have a lot of elites after all, and most certainly that Rudar catapult certainly did a lot of damage. Brotherhood of the Wain doing some good job. The Franodine Rangers, are they caught here? Are they going to be able to retreat, or are they just going to try and get as many kills as they can? They should try and retreat. Rangers are such a useful tool in the late game, and certainly the attackers will want to silence them if they can, but it's been costly for the attackers, but I do still feel as though they have done what they needed to. They've managed to force their way into the settlement, and now this is where they can start to clean up. As the defenders try to retreat stuff, they can catch a few units, they can get a lot of kills as the defenders try to pull back. Bit of a rearguard action going on here from the crossbowmen and the Variag mercenaries as some more Gondor infantry pulls up the hill. Gondor in particular had to take a lot of damage on the chin from those Rudauer javelins and that catapult. As the Brotherhood of the Wain start to pull back, how much ammunition they have would sort of decide for me whether or not it would be worth sending them back to the town centre. If they have a lot of ammo left, you can just use them more as crossbowmen here in the late game. If they don't, then you may as well use them to sort of try and break up the advance and save as many of your other units as you can. Seafarers of Nindamos killing off the Rudauer catapult crew with ruthless efficiency, as you would expect. Nurad Windblades are over here, so just the fact that Khan have got those chariots and those units of melee cavalry means that they, the attackers will need to be a little bit careful as they move forward. Yeah, these Elvalin Vanguard, they are getting run down by the chariots, wavering. Are they going to break? No, they just about keep their morale together. And that does go to show how resilient the Elvelyn units can be. A lesser unit would certainly have broken there after taking a charge and then a few volleys from a chariot unit. Speaking of resilient, still this whole army is being held up by the Black Bolt and the Witch Roman Slavers, who I believe are Lock Morale, both of them. The Black Bolt are a Berserker unit, the Witch Roman Slavers obviously the most elite unit of infantry Rudauer have. Just trying to kill as many as they can, holding up this army here in the south. Which of course does mean that the reinforcements are going to be ever further away for Cardolan. Cardolan, who look like they're finally making a little bit of progress now that the Tharbad Warhammers are on the front line supporting the Minhiriath Men-at-Arms and the Greenway Garrison Footmen. But it's been so costly for Cardolan as well, you would question whether or not they will have the manpower in the late game to really be an asset in trying to claim the town centre from the forces of darkness. Here we can see the Flagrim killing some Tharbad Warhammers actually that trickled their way up onto the wall. Cardolan still have their crossbows, to be fair, which, you know, all three units of their crossbows, which is a worrying thing certainly for the defenders. If Khan still have their chariots, I would honestly be very tempted to use my chariots to try and kill those Cardolan crossbows, or at least a good portion of them. There are the Brotherhood of the Wain. They finally do lose a unit model there. But they've been very resilient. Lucky Hussar has done a very good job at keeping them moving, because that really is the key to chariots. If you allow them to stop moving and a bunch of enemy infantry, they're going to die very quickly. Meanwhile, they're going to charge right through the Erin Vaughan Axemen, doing a lot of damage to them. Yet more of Cardolan's army just chewed into. They may lose another one of their models there. No, it does manage to get away from the Minhiriath spears. And there go the Nurad Windblades as well. So Khan are doing a good job here. This is exactly what you will want to use cavalry for in a siege like this, breaking up the attackers as they try to advance from one layer to another. And obviously the Rudauer infantry playing their part as well by just refusing to die, taking a lot of men with them. But Gondor and Dorwinion still very much a factor. Here in the north, we can see that some Balchoth tribesmen were caught, as were some Variag bowmen, by the onrushing Imladris and Numenor forces. Imladris and Numenor do need to be a little bit careful though. They should only begin their assault on the town centre when the other three human factions are ready to do so in the south. At least I assume that's how they're going to organise themselves, because then of course that will put the maximum amount of pressure on the defenders, whereas if you go in now, you'll allow the elites in the town centre to focus you down, and particularly considering the quality of Imladris and Numenor, you definitely want to conserve that as much as you can if you're the attackers. Still a few pikes as well, the Variag bowmen broken and fighting to the death. What have we here? Ah, still the Brotherhood of the Wain doing damage, this time to Axemen of Lasarnak. And now there's Gondor archers out in the open. They are going to take a charge now from the Axemen of Lasarnak by the looks of things, but once again they manage to roll away. No, actually they don't. The Axemen of Lasarnak do claim another one of those precious unit models, but yet more of the Gondorians fall away, and they just manage to get away before the Pelagia Marines get a volley of javelins off into them. But this could be a problem because they're coming back, and the Pelagia Marines, this could be the opportunity the attacks have been waiting for to finally kill those pesky chariots. A very nice volley. And of course javelins, because the chariots are technically in the game files classified as elephants. That's what gives them their mass to really pull through units. Javelins are lethal against elephant class units, and that finally might be enough. You know, with only 3 chariots left, the Brotherhood of the Wain will be significantly less useful, but they've already paid for themselves, more than paid for themselves really. They've done very well. But now the Pelagia Marines may be getting a little bit too far ahead of themselves as the chariots that are remaining do charge into them, and yet more valued Gondorian soldiers are going to be killed off as these 9 chariots once again scythe their way through the Pelagia Marines. And following them in, I was about to ask if he was going to do that in Lucky Assar, but the Nurad Windblades also come in to charge the Pelagia Marines, and if they can kill off some javelin units, that would be exceedingly valuable from a defender's point of view. The Nurad Windblades are so fast as well that, you know, with the speed of how they can move across the field, you know, they're much less likely to be slow enough to where the javelins can get a sneaky volley off. So that is something else about the Windblades that's worth mentioning, even though primarily, of course, their speed is for catching other cavalry units. Can still be useful. And still, I think they were going after the Windblades, but they got out of range before they could get their volley off, and now the chariots running through them once again. Very nice indeed. So what are Imladris doing? Are they going to wait? Looks as though they are, so that's good. Good to see. Bit of coordination. There goes Rudau's general. Finally their general falls. Having the Dragon's Breath cannon at this stage in the battle is also going to be absolutely vital for the defenders, because obviously with its linear arc of fire it can just cut through the attacks on one side, and I do think they've done the right thing by pointing it towards Imladris and Numenor, because the amount of value you can get off with a single shot against those 2 factions is going to be higher than against the others. Minhiriath archers trying to get through, but being overwhelmed by a combination of mercenaries and Flagrim. Still, Cardlan having a rough time of it. Gondor and Dorwinion not able to push forward quickly enough to reinforce, and Cardlan's army is certainly going to be extremely battered and bruised as we move in to the final phase of this fight. Siege tower just moving over. They're trying to get their sharpshooters up on the wall now. Sharpshooters trying to fire a few volleys through the gate as what's left of the Cardlan infantry force is still fighting hard. The Greenway garrison footmen doing what they can. The Brotherhood of the Sword have done very well in the front line as well, though. And again, this is what a dual-wielding unit offers you. A lot of melee defense, very difficult to wear down in melee. But now that crossbow bolts are starting to fly in, that will be a real problem for them. Albeit not many, because of the positioning of the unit and how difficult it can be to get units to shoot through gates efficiently. There's the Franodine Rangers. What have we over here? Still 3 chariots remain, although at this point they're being hounded by Fountain Guard. They definitely don't want to charge into the middle of Fountain Guard. They'll be ripped to pieces very quickly indeed, but they've done very well. You know, Lucky Hussar has done well in breaking up this advance and keeping Gondor and Dorwinion from reinforcing Cardlan quickly enough. The Minhiriath spears are coming around at this point. But the Franodine Rangers, I think what they're going to try and do is get some volleys on the Fountain Guard as they move forward. But unfortunately for the Franodine Rangers, unfortunately for Cardlan, they've got some Minhiriath spears to try and use against them. They need to get into them quickly though, because they're getting some nice frontal shots onto the Fountain Guard. Yet more Gondorian soldiers perishing. Yeah, this is unfortunate for Secretariat, because this is the right thing to do, but just a bit of battlefield awareness, realising that this is a path that can be taken, And this is a good job from Stu Balrog. He's had a tough time of it in this game, not really of his own making. He did the right thing by attacking. You could argue that maybe he should have attacked the other gate, but finally, with Gondor and Dorwinion coming to his aid, he's also returning the favour a little bit by preventing those Rangers from getting grievous damage done on those Fountain Guard. Windblade's taking a few losses there, but getting a lot of damage on those Minhirdath spearmen. The rest of the Cardlan army is over here. Are those Brotherhood of the Sword just going to be left there? Maybe. Another unit of Minhirdath men-at-arms being committed forward. Brotherhood of the Sword being used as a rear guard, but they have done a very good job at holding this line, to be fair, alongside the runic forces that made up the bedrock of the line in the Scion Rim and the Gamp Rim. Yeah, Imladris and Numenor definitely waiting for things to resolve themselves in the south, which, as I said, definitely the right thing to do. Fountain Guard cresting the hill. Having a look at the percentage of kills, I mean, the defenders are losing substantially. But they do still have a lot of elite units, and that cannon, the Dragon's Breath, it can turn this fight around. I know it can. I've seen what it can do when it has a very nice shot to make. But I would still give the advantage to the attackers here. The attackers have got a lot of quality, and they also have the right kind of units. They've got crossbows that they can move into position. It's not the easiest shots because they'll have to move them onto the bridge. But even so, with the amount of crossbows Cardlan still have left, they can afford to just sort of move them in one by one. Granadine Rangers, I think, sensing the fact that these crossbows are such a deadly tool for Cardlan, the Rangers are going to try and kill a few of them off. But again, heavily armoured, shielded as well, albeit with their backs to the Rangers. And this is going to be the end of the Brotherhood of the Sword. Quickly killed when the Fountain Guard entered the fray. And finally, Cardlan are going to be able to get their full army within the settlement. I think this is just routing units over here, just making sure that they haven't got any sneaky cavalry. Well, I say that, there is some sneaky cavalry. There are the Nurad Windblades. Interested to see, are the chariots still alive? I can't imagine why they would not be. Unless we see their corpses somewhere around here. No, those are Nurad Windblades. You'd think you'd be able to keep track of the chariots, they're easy enough to spot most of the time. And the Windblade's now able to cycle charge into the Seafarers of Nin Damos, and certainly the defenders need to start getting some kills quickly here. Otherwise the Grey Havens will certainly find their way back into the hands of the Free People. Wow. Well, there you can see the Dragon's Breath cannon ripping through the Remena Abaddon and the Narin Rear Guard and the Imladris sentries. A very nice shot indeed. Another nice hit as well, a lot of kills. And even in this formation, I mean, the Dragon's Breath, much like the Hwacha, it's very difficult to mitigate the damage on that thing. You know, with a catapult or a trebuchet, you can just sort of put yourself into loose formation and get yourselves into long lines, which is exactly what Imladris and Numenor were doing, to be fair. They were doing the right thing to mitigate a normal piece of siege equipment's damage. But the Dragon's Breath is not a normal piece of siege equipment. But now they're sort of just getting out of range of it. But at this point, Rudau are retreating their Black Bolts, retreating their Rangers. The Elvelyn marksmen are shooting them. The Black Bolt's going to be used as a rear guard. I think they probably are. The Black Bolts are probably a unit the defenders wanted in the town centre, though. They may not be the best in terms of defensive values. They're still multiple HP, there's still a lot of AP that you can use on one of your front lines. They're going to be reliant on the cannon here, though, to do the business. They do still have some Rangers back there, I can see them. The Carmel's Shadow Bows. Gondor yet again taking point. You have to wonder how much manpower Gondor truly has left. Cardlan still has all those sharpshooters. Dorwinion, yeah, I mean, they still have a fair amount of units coming in here. Dorwinion probably with the most infantry. Well, I say that. Gondor still have a fair few. No, Dorwinion definitely have the most infantry, including the Elvelyn Hammer Guard. Here come the Granadine Rangers, presumably out of ammunition at this point. So they're just going to come in here. I don't know. I feel as though that is a bit of a waste. Even if the Rangers are out of ammo, keep them in the town centre, use them later on one of your front lines, because sending them in here isn't going to save the Black Bolts. And you won't really get enough kills to make it worth your while. And here the sharpshooters getting into position, as are the Elvelen marksmen. This is a good blob of units. The question is, can the cannon actually shoot them? If it can, then they should. They absolutely should, because it's Fountain Guard. Very worthwhile target to go after. And if there's anything behind the Fountain Guard, which I mean there is, there's sharpshooters, men-at-arms, could even hit the half guard. Yeah, and here we go. That is very unfortunate. A nice clump of friend. Well, technically they hit Elvelen marksmen and broke them, but yeah, a very underwhelming shot that. And I feel as though the Gondorians now are going to be very alerted to the fact that the cannon is pointing at them, and they're going to run. So yeah, unfortunate for the defenders, to say the least. What's going on the other side? The Eldarenway archers are moving in, so I think the plan here is going to be to try and kill the crew of this particular piece of artillery, unless the archers are already out of ammunition, and they may very well be. I mean, here are the Variag mercenaries, also the only 23 strong crossbowmen. Yeah, they buried that into the wall, and that is the problem. I mean, they can't afford to be wasteful with a single shot here, the defenders of the cannon, because this is their ticket to winning. If they waste too many of those shots, it's game over. They don't have the quality nor the numbers to withstand a two-pronged assault from the defenders at this point. This front line, made up of Scion Rim on the front, shored up by Variag mercenaries. Eldarenway units are coming in though, so it's a sign of things to come, most certainly. Two different hues of gold, but you can see that there are some nice shots coming in from the side of the Variag mercenaries. Variag mercenaries not the most damaging arch unit, but they do have a very nice shot there. Sapphire Bladesmen also, very nice javelins on them, as well as a decent amount of skill in melee. Forward come Numenor. Once again, I would not be too surprised to see Numenor push forward very aggressively, although I would perhaps hold off on that in this case, purely because it will give the defenders the ultimate blob to go after. You can see here Rune forming up a front line. Dorwinian are probably going to try and skirmish Rune down a bit with their Elvelen marksmen, but I mean, Imladris and Numenor are attacking on the other side. To my mind, I think the forces in the south also need to launch an all-out attack, because if they don't, the Dragon's Breath cannon will be able to focus on one side in particular, and it probably would be Numenor and Imladris anyway. The Blackwolves are coming forward again just to try and stop the Elvelen marksmen from doing their thing. Elvelen marksmen have got decent missile damage, actually, all things considered. 6 is not half bad. Better than most standard human archers, which often have 5. Forward come Pelagia Marines. Yeah, these Blackwolves are going to be crushed, but they will stop the Elvelen marksmen from firing for just a little bit, which is a worthwhile endeavour. What's that cannon doing? It's coming over here. Now, bear in mind that these walls over here are effectively sort of not there. You can see from the way that units phase through them, and the fact that the archers and the javelins are sort of shooting through it as well. So it could be that the cannon's trying to get an angle, maybe by putting itself over here, to shoot right through this position, which would be a worthwhile endeavour, certainly. But yeah, the forces in the south need to move forward here, because Numenor and Imladris are taking an awful lot of damage, because all of the defending skirmishers can focus on them at this point. They have archers, they have rangers getting into position. The Sapphire Bladesman, the Dragon's Breath cannon is also getting into a position that's quite menacing. It does look as though now they are moving forward. I can understand the desire to try and use the crossbows and the javelins, but you need to put some sort of pressure on them here. I think the Dragon's Breath cannon is maybe thinking about positioning itself over here. Some Flagrim and Silrim preventing the Pelagia Marines from getting easy volleys off, and the Pelagia Marines can kind of look after themselves in melee, but they're certainly not the last word in terms of quality. And here into the final 10,000 frames. It's a 12% differential the defenders need to overturn. I think, based on past experience, that's a little bit too much. But I mean, anything's possible, I suppose. That was a brutal hit, though. Just going right through. Minhiriath Men-at-Arms, Gondoribji, nothing overly important. The Minhiriath Sharpshooters may be the most important unit that they hit, but a lot of kills nonetheless. And they need far more of that. it's a very good addition to Rune, because to be fair, Rune's roster has remained mainly the same because their roster was pretty complete. And also their unit models, there's no real need for extra unit models for Rune, because so much work was put into them by the vanilla 3rd Age team. I heard a story actually that the runic unit models initially were actually too detailed for Medieval 2. That's how much work was done on the Golden Boys. So there's really no need for them to really receive an update. They already looked fantastic as they were, much like the dismounted Knights of Illuminats. Yeah, mid here the sharpshooter's taking a shot there as well. The cannon proving its worth and worrying the attackers over on this side. But how are the defenders holding up over here against the combined might of Numenor and Imladris? Some of the scariest infantry you can hope to face in Middle-earth. And it is an evenly matched infantry fight, and a lot of this will come down, I think, to the Nurad Stormguard, because if they can kill off the Elven Pikes over here, the Nurad Stormguard will have free reign to do as they will. These Ferodrum Javelins need to get out of harm's way, because the Nurad Stormguard, they're one of 2 Phalanx units in the games to have multiple HP, the only Halberdier to have multiple HP. It makes them a very strong unit indeed, especially against the more heavily armoured forces of Numenor and Imladris. So if they can keep themselves in good order, who knows? Meanwhile, charging forward come the Brotherhood of the Axe, and they will find themselves in a very advantageous engagement against the more heavily armoured Gondorians. In support, well, there goes the Gondorian general, grilled alive by the Dragon's Breath. Much damage they actually do. A lot to the Wardens of the White Tower by the looks of things, so again very worthwhile. The Alvelin marksmen using fire arrows to try and make something happen, but they're really not going to be able to break units unless they're trying to set fire to the artillery. But like, the arrows are flying all around. Like, from that distance and from that angle, even a unit of decent archers like the Alvelin marksmen, most of their shots will go wide. Here you can see though, the defenders being given a taste of their own medicine as they push forward here. Minotaur Roman Guardians able to shoot through the walls. And the Ferodrum Javelins, yeah, like, I feel as though Secretariat just needs to keep these Ferodrum Javelins safer than he's doing. Like, I'm all for being aggressive, but this is reckless. Brotherhood of the Axe taking a lot of damage from the crossbows. Excuse me. It is also worth saying that Brotherhood of the Axe as an Axeman do tend to have lower skill than swordsmen, and that is a bit of a downside to Axemen. I do feel as though their skill should be bumped up at least a little bit, because as it stands, you know, a lot of it is down to the crossbows, I admit, but you do feel as though they should be doing better against the armoured Gondorian legions. Brotherhood of the Spear being sent in. I think they're hoping for more of a blob to once again use the Dragon's Breath. This front line over here, however, is holding up very, very nicely, you'd have to say, but over the long haul, the elite infantry of Numenor and Imladris should be enough to force their way through this choke point, you would say, and I would still most certainly give the advantage here to the attackers. But I'm sure with the forces of good on the attack, people would not be too concerned if they were to win this fight. If it were the other way round, Orcs OP, please nerf. Crossbows doing some damage though. Certainly not getting through here for free. Mercenaries, yeah, you can see here the Cardlin crossbows. I have grown to despise crossbows a little bit, honestly, just because of the amount of power that they can give to the battlefield and the amount that they can influence a frontline fight. And I do feel as though that's why Cardlin are popular. Like, people may sort of mank and moan that Cardlin's morale is not that great, and yet people keep playing them. And I do feel as though that's because of these bad boys over here, the Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers and their Minhiriath Sharpshooters, because crossbows offer you such a high amount of stopping power, and with the fact that archers just don't offer that, I feel as though that's why. Crossbows are a very, very powerful tool, and you could argue as well that it's only in certain situations that they're useful, but to be honest with you, on a field battle as well, I would find it very difficult not to bring a hefty contingent of crossbows. And it's not about Yes, you can have Cardland armies that are viable without their crossbows, but why ever would you nerf yourself like that? It would be like being Rohan or Khan and bringing nary a single unit of cavalry. Of course you could do that, but why would you? In come the Naru and Aru Royal Guard, which will give their morale buff to the nearby Numenorians. Balchor Sapphire Bladesmen coming a little bit closer, perhaps trying to use their javelins. Because they definitely need to at this point. The shadow bows are doing their thing. I'll just zoom out a little bit just in case of a crash. In comes some Romen and Nardukadar as well, but the Rangers definitely need to get the full contingent of kills if the defenders are to turn this around. Yeah, you can see here once again the Ferodrim Javelins just going right into the lion's jaws. And Secretariat can't be too surprised for getting bitten. Ferodrim Javelins at this point, they're just trying to get into melee to help the Brotherhood of the Spear hold the line, and with those big war clubs they will be of some assistance. Just having a little look in here. Minhiriath Men-at-Arms and Gondorians fighting side by side. There's the Alvelin marksman. Honestly, if I were the attackers at this point, particularly if I were Dorwinian, I'd probably send forward the Hammer Guard just to really put the screws to the defenders. There's a lot of arrows still finding their way into Numenor and Imladris. Right, so what's the cannon doing? It's coming over here, I think trying to get an angle, and that is a good angle that they have now on the forces of Dorwinion, Gondor and Cardolan. They may hit their own men though, which will probably be enough to rout their front line, to be honest with you. This is the issue with artillery, of course. Trying to get it into position to shoot, especially with a piece that has sort of a linear arc of fire like the Dragon's Breath or the Isengard Ballista. Devastating if you can get the right shot, but it ain't half frustrating if your artillery just refuses to fire. Yeah, the Sapphire Bladesmen now charging into melee, and they will offer a good amount of damage in melee, to be fair. And also with those ranger shots coming in as well. Numenor and Imladris starting to look a little bit thin on the ground for manpower, but that's not something that Gondor, Dorwinion and Cardolan need to worry about, because I do feel as though the defenders have prioritised Numenor and Imladris, and I think rightfully so, with the elite nature of their units. And will the cannon do its thing? Because it needs to. Time is running out. A unit of Flaggrim is heading down there to try and help hold the line. But the Dragon's Flame needs to be put to good purpose here. Rune needs to hold his nerve here, my doppelganger. He needs to just sort of hold his ground. He is going to fire in. He does get a hit, but I mean, you know, Nandor, Glade Guard, Hearthguard needs to be on the infantry at this point. They need to be aiming for the blobs. They can't afford to just be aiming at individual units that are sticking out, because the deficit at this point is too great. Here come the Imladris Guardians coming in, which is going to prompt Rune to commit forward their Carmel's Chosen to try and hold this front line as well. Yet more arrow fire coming in. Carmel's Shadow Bows. The Ferodrim Javelins at this point so depleted after being sent forward right into the firing line. Still a pretty healthy unit of crossbows all in all. But yeah, I think at this point it's fairly clear that the defenders aren't going to have the manpower to withstand this kind of pressure for too much longer. And that goes to show that, you know, even if you do start taking a lot of heavy losses when you're defending, that's a little bit more like it. They're shooting into the right area now, at least, even if the hit went a little bit short. But Gondor, you know, they took a lot of losses. Cardolan took a lot of losses. All the attackers took losses early on. But with an aggressive push on all sides, the lower the lower amount of armies that the defenders had at the very least struggled to deal with that level of pressure, and that's how it should be done. Makes it very difficult for the defenders in a 5v3 if you're aggressive like this. And of course the Grey Havens does allow this level of aggression by having multiple ways into the settlement, a lot of gates that you can use. But, you know, for most settlements you are at least able to go into 3 or more areas. It's pretty much the antithesis of the siege that we saw Harad and Imladris defending a couple of battles ago, where one player was far too passive and did not make use of the choke point that he could have gone up, and that allowed the defenders to bottle the attackers up and ultimately eke out a narrow victory. Whereas here, the quality of the attackers as well certainly helped them. When you have factions like Numenor and Imladris on the attack, if you're unable to make your numbers pay against them early, you're always going to struggle. Especially when they combine their might like this. I'm not surprised that the defenders tried to single them out. Not a lot of reserves left over here though. Gwythi, Myrdain and Swordmasters, to be fair, are two of the strongest units of Imladris. But they don't have all that much left. And that is because a lot of the javelins and crossbow bolts were directed over here. And also I think earlier on, the forces that were arrayed in the south also probably took more losses getting into the settlement than those two did. Some Nandor Glade Guard on the front line now as well, adding even more AP. You can see how long the Brotherhood of the Spear have held up though as well. The Brotherhood of the Spear and Sword lasting quite a long time. The Brotherhood of the Axe unfortunately falling afoul of Cardland's crossbows, as many units will. Javelins being thrown into the shadow bows, out of ammunition at this point, so drawing their blades and just in a measure to try and kill off as many as possible, you'd have to say. The defender's going to commit them to the front. Rangers have a decent amount of defensive skill to them, of course. This unit of Flagrim may as well be committed somewhere at this point. The Dragon's Breath perhaps doing what it should have done earlier and getting side on to these units. Going to try and shoot right through this formation of Numenor. I mean, it should just go here. It should just go here. I think that's what it's finally going to try and do. Again, it was always, even if the cannon did perform ideally, it always would have been a tough ask, but I do feel as though that is a bit of a mark against my doppelganger here. A little bit hesitant with his artillery, perhaps, not getting it into the best positions, and I know that artillery can be a real pain in the ass to get into the right place, as it just refuses to fire sometimes, but hey, you know, it's still something that could have been done a little bit better. Ooh, they need to be careful here, because they could end up rolling down the cliff if they get too close. Right, come on. This is your moment, Dragon's Breath. Shooting right through, and that will do devastating damage. A little bit too little too late, I would think, but nonetheless. Obviously this model is a bit of a placeholder, I'm sure we will be making something else. Yes, there we go. The projectiles bouncing rather unpredictably, that one bouncing almost completely out of the settlement because of the angled nature of this ground over here. But all of a sudden, looking pretty good. But of course over here, the Flagrim is there. Who admitted defeat, I wonder? Probably one of the defenders. Probably Rudauer, based on the fact that Rudauer have nothing left. Elder Runway Swordmasters at this point. Oh dear, oh dear. That was grisly. That was grisly as well. Enough to break Elder Runway Swordmasters. And they had actually managed to fight their way toward the cannon as well, but their unit in the end just losing stomach for the fight. Camel's Chosen trying to hold the line. Flagrim are over here now. Elvalin Marksman. I mean, certainly this is just a sort of last stand more than anything for the Dragon's Breath cannon, but it will still bloody the attackers' noses as they come into the settlement. Elder Runway Swordmasters still routing. Ooh, a narrow miss there, going after the two elite units for Numenor. Can they get another shot off before the Elvalin Marksmen close them down? I don't think so. Huge bombards. Well, the Elvalin Marksmen engaging the cannon crew in melee, the Dragon's Breath. And with that, the battle will come to a close. Still on the front line, I noticed, as they often do, the Nurad Storm Guard still clinging on. Very difficult unit to dislodge from a front line, fighting side by side with their fellow men of the East, the Camel's Chosen and the Balchos Sapphire Bladesmen. In come finally the Elvalin Hammer Guard, although their kill count will be pitiful because this is the first they've actually seen of combat. The Elder Runway Swordmasters did return from routing, but here you can see the final phases of this fight. A bloody one indeed. There goes the Runic General. Dragon's Breath Cannon broken and fighting to the death. And now this just leaves the locked morale units fighting on the front line, the Storm Guard and the Carmel's Chosen, sandwiched in between some of the finest units of infantry that Middle-earth has to offer. Of which the two of them can count themselves among that number, but at this point the battle is lost. Their daring capture of the Grey Havens has ultimately been for naught, as the Free Peoples managed to take it right back. Quite the Emirdane coming in as well. Scared geese. That's an interesting say. Almost as good as horns made of clay. And there we go. Victory for the attackers, and a good assault as well, nice and aggressive, and that's how you have to be as the attackers, because it puts the emphasis on the defenders to have a perfect game, and any minor mistake you make is amplified if the attackers just do that. You can also see that a lot of kills from Imladris and Numenor doing very well in the north. Gondor getting a lot of kills as well. Obviously they took a lot of losses going through the gates, as did Dorwinion. Cardlan also. It was a costly push through, especially for the southern factions in this fight, the human kingdoms. But they still did their job, and they did very, very well. You know, Lucky Hussar getting the fewest amount of kills, but also he did very well in sort of breaking up the assault. Things could have been far worse if Cardlan was allowed into the settlements sooner than they were. And exactly identical kills for Brune and Rudauer. Let's see what did the damage for Lucky Hussar, however. Stormguard did okay. Obviously they were holding the line in the late game, as they often do. Brotherhood of the Axe got a lot of kills, to be fair, in the short time they were alive, which shows their more aggressive nature in comparison to the other two Brotherhood units, which held the line for far longer but got lower kills. Nomadic Infantry 247, so a unit of archers, of course, which are decent in melee, will often get that level of kills in a siege, primarily from range, of course, but then adding a few in melee as well. Brotherhood of the Shadows, Nurad Halberds. But yeah, here we go with the two mounted units for what did the damage for Karland a lot. 428, I should say, on the Wind Blades, obviously very quickly getting in their charges. But the MVPs for him, certainly with the Brotherhood of the Wain, doing damage early on to the Elves, and then continuing to do so within the settlement. Very good use of the chariots here. But ultimately, even with very good use of those two mounted units, they weren't able to make that stick the defenders. A few individual errors, you know, maybe they should have fallen back sooner when it was clear that they were going to be overrun. You know, maybe, you know, it was when Numenor and Imladris did start to break through, it was a very big domino effect, as often happens on the Grey Havens, because it's a big ask to sort of fall back to the town centre and save everything. That middle section is often where the attackers could really make their numbers pay, and even with Lucky Hussar doing a good job with his mounted units, they still lost quite a few men on the way back to the town centre there. But yeah, good to see the chariots used very nicely at the very least, the Brotherhood of the Wain. And big thank you to Lucky Hussar also for sending this one in, because obviously it's always good to see the Grey Havens. We haven't seen it in 0.97 from me yet, at the very least. And that was a good one. That was reasonably close, and also a nice good versus evil siege. And this time good, showing that on an offensive siege their quality can be a lot. And I do feel as though that was another factor in this battle, the fact that the attackers had so much quality to bring to bear against the defenders. And that is something which is worth mentioning. While the forces of evil tend to have a lot of disposable manpower when they're on the attack, this is the other side of the coin, where the good forces can field a lot of quality, especially when you've got factions like Imladris, Numenor, even Dorwinion and Gondor. You know, Cardlan can even field some good quality as well, technically speaking. It can be hard for a fully evil army to deal with that, unless they have a lot of good quality of their own. And I feel as though even with all the quality they did field, it was difficult for them, very, very difficult. And it came down to just a pure brawl, and in the end the attackers had too much. But still, a good effort by the defenders on this occasion. As for moving forward, I'm not entirely sure what I'll be doing next. I still have plenty of replays to get through, of course, but I'm not sure which one I will be selecting to do next. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.